Dispatch was a game that I was highly anticipating for a while. Now I've played it, not just once, but twice. And so I'm here to answer the question, is Dispatch the best superhero game since Arkham? Welcome back, everybody. We are here to talk about Dispatch. I just finished my second playthrough. I played Robert like he was a complete jerk after playing him as best I could to make him the best hero ever. So I've done both of those. I've gone for Blonde Blazer. I've gone for Invisigal. I've seen romances succeed and romances fail. But what do I think of the game overall? Before I get into this, I just want to say, spoiler warning in effect. I will be talking about things that happen in the game. I will be talking about the ending of the game later in the review. So you have been warned. Also, I want to know, who is your favorite character from Dispatch? And if you could romance anyone, who would it be and why? Tell me down below. I want to start off with one of the strengths of this game. I think this is actually the strongest element of the game, and that is voice acting. Personally, I think Aaron Paul steals the show as Mecha Man. He is definitely the best voice actor for this game that we had, and it's pretty cool to have him in this cast. And actually, I think it's also very smart of him to take this job because he just like completely nailed it. I don't know if he's done other video games before, but I hope he does more in the future because this was such a nuanced performance with him as Robert Robertson. I think the fact that you also have to, when you do a sort of branching path game like Dispatch, which of course is done by some of the people from Telltale Studio, some of the people that made this game are from Ubisoft. It is a love letter, though, I think, to that style of game. And of course, also coming from Critical Role as well, who was also involved in the making of Dispatch. There's a lot that you're going to have on your plate because there's not just the lines that you have to have for one scenario, but you have to do multiple versions of your line in case we go into different scenarios. And there's scenes that you can see depending on how you play the game and scenes that just completely get skipped if you don't take that path. There is, of course, also Jeffrey Wright in this game as Chase, who's another one of my favorites, but it doesn't really end in terms of who I love because I think everyone honestly did a great job, especially Charlie White. Of course, we know him very well from The Hunger Games. Just a mega star, that guy, as Sonar. And Sonar was one of my favorite characters in this game. But I also feel that the thing that I love about it is that a lot of the voices that we recognize, like Joel Haver, like Alana Pierce, like Charlie, they are bringing their usual speaking voice to this. And I love that Joel Haver talked about the fact that when he was playing Waterboy initially, he kind of tried to do like a voice. And they were just like, no, we want you to just be yourself. So the voice acting for me is probably the best element of this game. However, it is not the only element that I think is amazing, and it is important to note that if we're comparing this game to something like Arkham, there are other elements as to why I love Arkham. Voice acting is one of them, though, I will say. The next one is characters, and I've touched on it a little bit with some of my favorite cast members that are in here and the characters that they play. But I think the thing that I love about this game is that all of the characters feel real. The writing feels real. The way that we approach who these people are, everyone has some kind of nuance to them. Like, no one is really too one note. And I think while there are varying amounts of characters that we get. So obviously characters like Coop and Sonar, depending on how you choose to play this game, are more or less present. You know, same with Jacksepticeye plays Punch Up, who I also loved. And we also get less of some of these characters because they're not as involved in the story. But I think the characters that we see the most of, and if we were to see more of these characters, hopefully if we get a season 2, you would understand that all of them have some level of depth. And even though on the surface I thought Phenomenon was a complete jerk, then I did my second playthrough where I recruited Phenomenon and I just realized he's the saddest, nerdiest boy, and now I just want to play Magic with him. I don't know if he plays Standard or Commander, but I would play any Magic with Phenomenon because he's such a delightful character. And all of the characters are like that. The more you get to know them, the more I fell in love with all of them. Whether it's Blonde Blazer or our main character, Mecha Man, Even Royd. I love Royd so much. Just all of these characters hold a special place. And even Shroud has more depth than I was initially thinking he might. There's just a lot going on for everybody. And that is something I appreciate about Dispatch. And that is something I also appreciate about Arkham and just the Batman universe in general. There's always a lot going on with our characters. But whereas Arkham and Batman has a world where the characters tend to be a bit more larger than life, this game has elements of that, but at its core, it's got so much heart that like every character really does feel real. And a big part of that is because of the writing in this game. And I would say the writing and the story are definitely the elements that kept me coming back the most. I wanted to know what would happen in the next episode, and I love that this was a weekly release. I know there were a lot of people that were nervous about that initially, but I think that works really well for this type of game. And let's be real, this is a very specific type of game, and I'm gonna talk about some of the criticisms of the game a little bit later on in my review, so we'll talk about the specific type of game it is and the pros and cons to that. But that is where I feel you want to have an episodic release. That's where it makes the most sense because of the style of gameplay. It's not Silent Hill F where I got to fight these monsters around every corner and strategize every single move I make in a fight. It is a game where you are playing to explore the world. It is all about fun and exploration. And sure, you can min-max. You could min-max. I did a little bit of that in my second playthrough when I got more into the hacking elements of the game and got a little bit more invested in that. But that's not really, I think, what Dispatch is about. It's really a game for people that love good stories, love rich storytelling that feels grounded, and like to have an emotional experience with the game. This game made me laugh. This game made me cry. That it had twists and turns. It had surprises. When Chase sacrificed himself to save Invisigal, some part of me broke in my brain because I knew it was coming because we had that smoking gun in episode 1. But the other thing about an episodic release, you get more time to think about things, but you also get more time to forget about things. And what I love about that is that then when the game brings things back around, it's so satisfying because you think back and you remember why this is happening and all of the building blocks have been laid because it's written by people that clearly understand how to tell a good story, how to craft a good story. So you can think back and think, oh my gosh, I understand why this is happening. And I knew it was coming, but I was so invested in the moment of being present with, at first, Chase and Robert in the apartment, and then getting pulled in to hacking and trying to help Invisigal as she breaks into the warehouse, that I completely forgot about episode 1 when we established that if Chase uses his powers again, there's going to be consequences to that. So the fact that the game is released that way, the fact that the game understands how to communicate these things to us is what makes it, for me, peak and what makes it a game that I want to play and play again. And because there are different scenes and secrets and things that you can uncover in it, and there's so much, I think there's a lot of people that want to call this game linear in a negative way. And while I would agree there are elements of it that are linear because there are certain plot points we have to hit for the major story beats, it is not linear in a traditional sense, in the idea that, you know, like if you play something like Arkham, we're Batman, we go here, we end up here. Along the way, there are some choices that we can make, but ultimately, where we begin, where we end, and the trajectory of the story is covered by how the game is structured. This game is not quite like that because there is a lot of hidden content that you have to play in certain ways to find and explore. It's not all presented for you and then you can just go to different locations. You have to think about how the story can change based on your choices, based on what kind of story you want to also tell. In a way, you become a part of the story, and that is something that very few games do in the same way that the Telltale games have done in the past, and in the same way that now Ad Hoc Studios is doing with Dispatch. And it is something that I've missed. It is something that I personally love as someone who is also a big tabletop RPGer who has been in love with games like Dungeons and Dragons since I was young. I've been playing it for years, And I love that stuff. I live for that stuff in games. So for me, that was a huge highlight. And obviously, there are certain elements of the game that just have to happen, but there are different endings you can get, and some of them are quite different. For example, in my first playthrough, I ended up having an almost perfect ending, except that I made the choice to kill Shroud. I did it because he threatened Beef, and I said at the beginning of the game, if you mess with my boy Beef, you going down. But, you know, I ended up redeeming Invisigal in that playthrough. I had a relatively heroic playthrough other than my ending. We defeated Shroud. All of that went pretty well for me otherwise. And in my second playthrough, boy was I shocked to learn at how it can end when Invisigal steps in and kills Shroud. Good lord. What? Of course, that's what happens when you're a jerk to people, because even though I was going for Invisigal romantically, I was not supportive enough of her as a friend and as a coworker. And so because of that, she ended up going the villain route, which in my first playthrough, I never would have guessed that was a thing until I heard about people talking about it online. And even then I thought, well, I've been there romantically for her. She's not going to turn on me. And she didn't. She did it to save my life. But it's the difference of her being the one to kill, and then I didn't even get the choice to spare Shroud, which I thought was crazy because I was super planning on doing that, and then I didn't even have the option. And that's what I mean when I say, too, this game is linear in a way, but within that, there are differences that are pretty monumental. Like the fact that I didn't even have the choice to decide what happens to Shroud, I think is huge for Robert. That is unresolved trauma still bubbling under the surface for that character. And there are ways that you could play with that in a season 2 versus someone who either killed Shroud or chose to spare him and basically got to make that choice themselves. There's going to be different elements of Robert that are going to come out of that you could play with in season 2 if we get one. I think we're getting one. At this point, come on. We're definitely getting one, right? But there is one other element that I need to talk about with this game, and that is the game mechanics. And while I loved a lot of it, obviously I love the voice acting, characters, the story, the writing, the game mechanics I think are cool, but left a little bit to be desired. And that's just because I don't think they're as deep as some other games that I've played this year. But it's just because there's not as much going on, and so I hope when we do get more of Dispatch, if we get more of Dispatch, that there will be more added to the mechanics there. I just want more to play with in my sandbox. There is still an element of skill that you need. I don't think it's like, you know, just move the box from one side of the screen to the other. There's still skill levels and choices you can make, and even story beats that you can uncover in the dispatching part of the game. But it wasn't as exciting as some other games that I've played, and it leaves a bit to be desired. So I'd say that's the least exciting part of the game, but still, the whole idea of deploying the right heroes and then that percentage of chance and how you have this kind of area of control to determine if you ping pong within the lines or outside of for success or failure on your mission, I thought that was really well designed and really cool. And as someone that also loves board games, there's an element of this game that I think that would also lend really well to a board game. I'm just going to say it. Dispatch, if you guys want to make a board game, do it. And then send me a copy and I will play it on stream because I freaking love board games. If we're comparing Dispatch to something like Arkham, for example, that is a game that I feel has more of a mass appeal. Dispatch is a bit more niche. And even though it's blowing up, and I won't deny that, there are going to be people that this is definitely not going to be their style of game. And I've seen some of those people. I've chatted with some of those people in my chat, and I've seen some of them online. And it is because this game is not structured in a way for everyone, that everyone will love it. And while I love the story, I do think there are elements of the game that could be improved upon. I think it is a linear story in ways. And for some people, when they want a choose-your-own-adventure story, they just want more than what this game will give us. Now, granted, as someone that has played Telltale games in the past and really enjoyed those, I think if you are one of those people, if you played the Game of Thrones game or the Batman game that they did, or Walking Dead, or Wolf Among Us, there is going to be enough here for you that you are going to be head over heels in love with it, as I am. I will play it a ton, I'm pretty sure, on stream and off stream. And I can't wait to dive more into this world. And I want to read the comics and I want to get the merch. And guys, there's merch. I'm not sponsored, but put some merch up here on the screen, please, for the people so that they can go and check it out, because you guys should support this game because it is a great game. And I truly believe that. Is it as good as Arkham? No, I don't think it's better than Arkham, okay? I think it's great. I think it's not for everyone, but I think it's great. But better than Arkham, yeah, I don't know about that. It is a cool superhero story, though, and I like that it's also within its own world. There are so many games that already exist in an IP, and I love when video games are not afraid to just do something completely independent of any IPs that we have had. And yet it still gets to play in a familiar world, because if you are like me and you love superheroes and you love exploring that fantasy, you get to do that. And you get to play as a superhero. You get to play as Mecha Man and you get to suit up, and it feels epic when you get your suit back. Man, and when the Z team's together, it's emotional. And I am here for the ride. So those are my thoughts on Dispatch. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Overall, I think I'd still give this game a 5 out of 5. I do think that there are elements, I guess, that could be improved upon. But for what the game is doing, for what it's set out to do, it's a 5 out of 5. And just in terms of my overall enjoyment, I gotta go there. But yeah, people that have issues, like I said, with these types of games, there are pros and cons, and there are some valid points for people that have criticisms. Let me know your thoughts on the game, though, down in the comments below. I want to know what you're thinking about it. How many playthroughs have you done so far? Tell me about some of your favorite moments, and let me know what you think I should be doing with this one next on stream. Should I play again? Should we try to uncover all the secrets? Tell me down below what you want to see. I'll see you guys in the next one, and until then, friends, stay nerdy. Bye! And if you love when I talk about Dispatch, you need to check this out.